Hi, I'm Curt Doty with RealmIQ, my AI consultancy, and this is our podcast, RealmIQ Sessions, where we talk about everything AI with international AI leaders and AI founders. Please give us a follow or subscribe. And today's guest is Evan Shapiro, who is the official cartographer of the media universe. How cool of a title is that? He's a prolific and pithy writer through his Media War and Peace newsletter, and now his new podcast, Media Odyssey, with co-host Marion Ranchet. He has run TV networks, streaming platforms, and produced Portlandia, among many other shows. He's won an Emmy and 2 Peabodys, and is a featured speaker at every media conference around the world. Shapiro is also a professor of media at NYU and Fordham Schools of Business. Shapiro leads the change agency eShap, which offers their partners and media insight and strategies of service. So welcome, Professor. We do go back a few years. You've been an advisor to me and certainly an inspiration. So glad to have you on our little show here.
Thanks so much. It's kind of you to ask me.
So yeah, we're talking about AI conversations. Obviously, I'm a little shocked that, AI has now not only been politicized, but geopoliticized. And so what was in the news from a tech bubble perspective is now exploding into the political arena. I certainly appreciated your perspectives on politics in the past and your voice. But what do you think is the future of AI now that it's been politicized, and how do we navigate this landscape? It's pretty tricky.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It seems like everything has been politicized of late. You can't escape the infiltration of political mindset into all aspects of our lives. I mean, and tech itself has been politicized, unfortunately, which, technology should have no dogma. It should just be, at least from my perspective. It's interesting. One of the key dangers in the AI ecosystem is, everything we keep thinking is going to democratize technology winds up solidifying the moat around these big tech companies. You can now add NVIDIA to that collection of big tech Death Stars that I write about often. And, you look at who's investing the biggest or the most in AI, it's the same companies that controlled Web 2.0, Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. And now you add NVIDIA to that. And, I don't think these companies are inherently evil, but they are inherently self-interested. And so consolidating their hold on power with regards to the information society is, paramount to their business plans, which is, why I think they're also pleased with the current change in administration, because there seems to be a deregulation movement happening, not a regulation movement happening. And, I'm neither for nor against regulation. I'm for sensible regulation when it makes sense, and I'm against stupid regulation when it does. But right now, I think there is I think accepted reality that, either the way AI is training itself may be not in the best interest of people who create content. And then on the flip side, they're in their AI is only as safe and unbiased as the people who design it. And so, I am concerned at, where not just AI, but technology itself is headed, because it doesn't seem to be that we're building it without a bias. It seems like we're purposely building it with a bias.
Yeah. So those same big tech leaders are the same big tech leaders in social media, and that's gone unregulated. And we've certainly seen the damage that has caused. And so those people in charge of social media, they don't want regulation, right? They want to be unbridled in their path of innovation, and they want to ride that hockey stick, competing in this vertical race as who can beat who and whatever features. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that Biden's, guidelines, they weren't really laws, but they were certainly guidelines for companies for self-regulation and reporting and transparency. I'm hoping that, those can exist as some type of guideline for companies alt tech companies.
Yeah, but
Wanted that.
what I find ironic about this entire topic is those companies who say they are anti-regulation want to keep Section 230 in place.
Yeah.
Section 230 is a piece of regulation. I mean, that's what it is. But what it does is it protects the platforms from being sued
You're right.
for the content that
That they,
traveled
yeah.
over their pipes and over their platforms. And if you're if you're against regulation, then you should be against regulation. And, if Google and Meta and Microsoft and Amazon and OpenAI and all of these other platforms were held responsible for misinformation that travels across their pipes, they'd be substantially more careful about the information that travels across their pipes.
Yeah.
And I think that's not regulation, that's freedom. And that's freedom of the consumer to hold companies accountable when they are damaged by the behaviors of those companies. And to me, I don't think there's anything more important in the United States right now than the removal of Section 230. I think it is one of the chief components to the crisis of truth that we now face in this country.
Yeah. It's also not just misinformation. I did a test this morning between ChatGPT and Google Gemini. I said, hey, what's the latest on what Trump is doing? And Google Gemini responded, oh, yeah, I can't talk about any political figures.
What now?
Yes, blocked. But yet ChatGPT did a, nice summary, unbiased, with a couple real links. So there's Google, saying, yeah, we're not going to say anything bad about, this
There was a
administration.
time when that company, their slogan was "Don't be evil."
Yeah, I think we can assume
I mean,
that the
again, I don't
Death
think.
Stars are evil and Darth Vader's, at the helm of every one.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side, I think there is this. So we have this conversation. We talk about the dangers of AI, and then on the other hand, what I think is happening as a byproduct is there are a lot of people who hear the hyperbole about AI and it replacing jobs, or they hear about the dangers, even from people like you and I, who are, I think trying to do the right thing. And then so they just shelter away from AI as a result of it. They refuse to engage in it, or they write it off as whatever. And, what will wind up happening is the people who refuse to engage in AI at this moment in time are going to be the ones that are going to be overwhelmed by it and overcome by it as the technology improves and proliferates. And so, what I would encourage people to do is to engage. So, I think the key is, jump in, get wet,
Absolutely.
and you'll learn how to swim. But if you avoid it by sitting just at the poolside, you're in danger of getting pushed in and drowning. And
Yeah.
I would like to take a second and say, I didn't know where that analogy was going before I started it, but it wound
Mhm.
up okay.
Well, my analogy is AI is a fast moving train. Either get on the train or you're going to get run over by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just on the what happens to those people who have their head in the sand. So the World Economic Forum estimates new job creation and job displacement will amount to 22% of today's total jobs, meaning there will be 170 million jobs that will be created by 2030. But conversely, that's offset by the loss of 92 million jobs, but net growth of 78 million. So people need to ask themselves, where are they going to be in that equation?
Right. That's exactly right. And then there's the, that's the creation and deletion of jobs by AI, right? But then there's a whole other hundreds of millions of jobs that will be changed by AI.
Yes. Yeah.
And, those, so somebody who works in editing right now,
Yeah.
or coding, frankly, gene splicing, like each one of these areas, or architecture,
Yeah.
each one of these areas are going to be affected by AI.
Yeah.
And so while your job may not be replaced by AI, your job will be taken by someone who is good at it. And so
Right. It
you are,
needs to be on the resume,
yeah, it
right?
absolutely does
And
need to
any
be on.
new hires, if it isn't on the resume, yeah, not going to be considered. So whether you're employed or not, if you're putting a resume out there without AI as a capability, then you won't be considered. And that's interesting. And I know you teach, and I'm just curious, what are you teaching your students? Because, this is a critical time for our youth and the next generation who's coming up the ranks living with all this. What are your observations? What do you tell your students?
Well, the first thing is that they seem substantially more comfortable with AI in their lives than, people my age and older. And the National Bureau of Economic Research put out a study at the end of last year showing that there's a huge age and gender gap.
Really?
That people under the age of 40 are substantially more comfortable engaging with AI than people over 40. And that men are far more comfortable engaging with AI at work than women.
Mm.
And when they asked the people who were not comfortable with it what their problems were, they were privacy concerns primarily.
Mm.
And those are justified concerns. Don't get me
Sure.
wrong. But you also carry a supercomputer in your pocket every day that's tracking your every movement, your heart rate.
Yeah, where you go.
You go on the highway, you use the Easy Pass. We know where you are. So, like you kind of got to get over the privacy concerns to a certain extent, I think.
Yeah.
Not to not be safe, but also just like realize like there is no expectation of privacy when you walk out of your house or even in your house anymore, and if you're not okay with that, maybe go move into a cave. But the way I try to inform my students about AI is it's like any other form of technology. If you become completely reliant on it, you will become obsolete yourself.
Yeah.
And it isn't about
That's the dumbing of America right there. If
That's
they rely
exactly
on-
right. I no longer know how to get anywhere on my own without a Google Map, and that's my fault. I don't know anybody's phone number.
Right.
I do not know anyone. I don't know my wife's phone number. I don't know my kid's phone number. I just go daughter,
Right. Yeah.
wife, mother, and
Or
so-
voice command.
right, exactly.
All the
And
way.
and that's the danger with AI is like, yeah, you can use AI to write your reports, but then when you get asked questions about it, what are you going to do?
Right.
You can't use AI to give your presentation for
No.
you. That's not how life works. So, you know, I'm not as dogmatic about like checking my students' work for use of AI because I feel like, look, if they hand in a report that feels well written, well researched, and well presented, and then they just really prompted AI incredibly well, or they used some combination of their own intellect and technology to produce a report that is enjoyable to me and taught me something. Who
Yeah.
gives a shit? Which ones at the end of the day. But it is the marriage of humanity and technology that I think will ultimately be the winner here. I like to talk about, I have a lot of film students and theater students in my class because it's a collaboration between Tisch and Stern, which is the business school and the art school. And, I get asked, when is AI going to be good enough? And this is not just by students. I was asked this on a podcast earlier this week, where will there be a time when AI is better at art than humans? And my answer to that is when AI decides to cut off its left ear because its girlfriend doesn't talk to it, then it will be able
And
to
humanity
face
and
Starry
everything.
Night. Right. Like
Right.
we're fucked up. And that's what makes us good artists.
Yeah.
We're not great artists because we're exacting with a ruler. Do you know what I mean? Like Picasso couldn't have done what Picasso did if it prompted AI and said, you know what? Give me a cubist version of this late.
Yeah.
And it is the marriage of humanity and technology that gives us film, right?
Yes.
That
Right.
gives us television, that gives us radio, that gives us podcasting. And it will be the marriage of those two that gives us the next generation of art that is the collision of artificial intelligence and actual.
Yeah. Speaking of film, film and AI is a big topic. I've covered it a lot. What are your thoughts about the film industry? And I believe it's been slow to really embrace it for obvious reasons around IP, unions, copyright issues. But yet the rest of the world has moved on and is using AI and video and commercials. And do you think there's a thaw happening with Hollywood, or, what's your observations around that?
It's interesting. So if you look at the adoption of Unreal Engine as a aspect of production, I mean, that's to a certain extent a piece of artificial intelligence. And so, The Mandalorian, basically all of its backdrops are, and, I don't think there's I'm sure there'll be set designers and graphics animators who will be upset by this, but the speed and reduction of cost that AI is going to allow and is already allowing a decent amount of the production stack to address is, I think, a good thing. I think people see it as an elimination of jobs, and in reality, what I hope it means is we'll make more good movies because we're going to spend less time. And like, why are we spending $300 million to make a movie? That doesn't make a
Yeah, it's
lot of
like a
sense.
Marvel movie, by the way.
Right, right. And I think Marvel is now getting to the point where they're like, maybe we should stop spending so much money on these movies because not all of them are making money.
Right,
Now,
exactly. Well,
Captain America just
it's too hard to make money back on that 300 million
it
investment,
really is.
and having that in marketing, it's like,
Although Captain America made $100 million this past weekend, and there's a lot of AI in that movie.
yeah,
There's a lot of AI in Sonic, the last Sonic the Hedgehog. Jim Carrey, a decent chunk of Jim Carrey's performance in the last Sonic movie was AI because he didn't want to
yeah,
be on set as much. But there's a really good example. Like Jim Carrey didn't want to be on set so much. We
right.
need Jim Carrey in this movie. Let's capture Jim Carrey's likeness and voice, and then we can put Jim Carrey in this movie with his permission without him having to be on set in this ridiculous threequel. Like that's not art.
Yeah,
Let's be honest, right? On the flip side, I think the most important aspect of AI in filmmaking will be in the ability for young, up and coming emerging artists to level up their production values to the point where they can actually compete with studio films without having to spend $100 million on a film. I think that's going to wind up being one of the most crucial contributions that artificial intelligence gives to the filmmaking.
yeah. And I will also say that I predict a boom in documentaries because AI can help
Right.
with scenes, restoring historical
Right.
scenes, bringing to life, vintage photographs. So all of a sudden it becomes a scene, not just a
Right.
Ken Burns drifting over a
Right.
photograph,
Right.
right?
I
It's
agree.
like, I think documentaries will get better with these tools that are extremely cheap, and they generally are very stressed, right? And their budgets.
Well,
And
that's the thing is like, there's not a harder aspect of entertainment right now than raising money to make a documentary that isn't true crime. Like put true
right,
crime
right.
aside for a second.
Yeah.
All other forms of documentary is under a crisis. They're having
Yeah.
a real hard time because there was this boom that Netflix inspired about 5 years ago that lasted for a decent amount of time. And then COVID happened and the world set up upside down. And,
No
and
problem.
so, this boom ended, and now there's a real crisis in both independent film and documentary film. That's mostly like, how do we get these films funded and where are they being distributed? But, it takes a year or more and $1 million to make a good documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Kurt. I think there's an opportunity to make it for a lot less and take a lot less time. And therefore, you don't need $1 million to make a documentary. You can make it for far less.
Far less and just remove obstacles of,
Right.
production. It's like, and make the films better, right? It's not just a matter of reducing costs, but actually making them better, right? Using the technology, which, technology shifts and filmmaking and film production have
Right.
always,
Imagine if filmmakers decide, and this is, and by the way, it's interesting. On one hand, entertainment has always been kind of the leading voice in the invention of new technology. Steve Jobs talks about how he was inspired by Star Trek. Fritz Lang was the first person on the world to create the countdown clock to zero in 1929 for Women in the Moon, long before NASA was a thing.
yeah.
In fact, they
Right.
brought Fritz Lang to the first blast off to show him,
Mm,
how his countdown had inspired them. And so, I think artists should be the first to imagine new uses for new technologies. But when you talk to filmmakers, specifically movie makers, about new technology and the creator economy and all these things, they're the ones that are kind of like most pearl clutching, like, oh my,
Yeah.
no.
All right.
Oh my, no. And I just, to me, it's shaking them loose of their, their love of the art in favor or instead of an embrace of technology. It's like, what would you do if you hadn't embraced film
Right.
or
Well, we'd still
sound
be watching
or
vaudeville
color
films,
or like
right? There'd
these
still
are
be
all
a
new
still be
technology.
a vaudeville and comedy and shtick, right? That was the entertainment before movies. And that's what Edison filmed was
Yeah.
like kind of a vaudevillian kind of presentation. And that really dictated the perspective of what films were. They were like, oh, they're plays put on a stage.
Right. The only reason Fritz Lang got to make movies is because a technologist named Thomas Edison invented the technology
Right.
that enabled him to make movies. And
Right.
so if it's the same analogy,
Yeah.
it today we have the new version of the camera. It's called
Yeah.
AI. Do
Yeah.
you want to use it? Or do you want to fall behind literally everyone else and still keep making silent films? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what Truffaut brought to cinema verite and, kind of evolved what you do with a camera. It isn't just a locked 3 camera type of, play, all of a sudden. And I believe that creative people using this technology are going to be the ones that elevate it to the next level. That's one of the reasons I got into television. Back in the day, when I started at ABC News, I was hired because I was this creative. I was this illustrator, storyteller, designer. And that's what they needed to guide where the technology was, which is the big chrome logos falling down
Right.
in news, right? And they said, my boss was visionary, Ben Blank. He said, we need creators in charge of this stuff, not the unions, which were
Well,
not in good art schools. They were
yeah,
electricians.
it is always the creatives. It is always the creatives who lead the charge with regards to new thought, progress in society, and the envisionment or the vision of what new technology can mean to the world. I mean, think about Gene Roddenberry. Think about Fritz Lang, Ursula Le Guin, science fiction writer. Snow Crash. Like all of these Ready Player One. Like we can talk about endlessly comic books.
Yeah.
You know, you look. I mean, look, the first interracial kiss ever seen on the TV. It depends on where you look at it, but it was either I Love Lucy or Star Trek.
Yeah.
And so entertainers like lead thought, and that's what we look to them for. But this recalcitrance that I see in a lot of people, especially the most kind of ardent artists, it's worrisome. It feels reactionary. And I don't think I don't think it's gonna do for them what they think it's gonna do for them.
Do to them. Yeah, certainly. But there are encouraging signs. So, and I believe this AI in video, I think is going to affect Madison Avenue
Yeah, I
sooner
agree.
than Hollywood because of the short form nature, kind of a non-linear, non sequitur type of fantastic videos that can happen with the AI fits right into the ethos of a Nike shoe, Prada bag, where it's just splash and spectacle. And that was cool, right? I'm going to remember that amidst the drivel of the rest of advertising. And yeah, they did it for less money. But, I also see this trend of agencies now, and Glenn Casper started one. He's famous kind of TV promo guy. And he said, I'm now chief creative officer of an agency that only does AI spots. That's groundbreaking. I hadn't heard that. It's like I talk with a lot of agencies, they're like, yeah, we're playing with it. It's a reality. We're trying to embrace it, learn it, and then bam, an agency says, oh, this is all we do, and that's like
Well, and
a tonic shift.
I work with a company called Social Department, which was founded by John Verk, who was the CEO of Promax, which is the promotion trade association, and whose entire reason for being at one point in life was getting promo producers and editors more work.
Mhm.
And he has created this platform that enables platforms to create high volume social video promos, 5-second Instagram videos,
Yeah.
using a really good producer editor to guide a piece of AI. It is
Yeah.
the combination of the two. And we did a John Henry versus the Steam Engine like game show the other day where we had an editor versus an editor working with this AI platform social department. And they're both very talented, award-winning producer editors.
Hmm.
We gave them 4 hours to watch 3 episodes of Yellowstone and produce as many good Instagram promos as they possibly could at the end of that time.
Yeah.
A producer editor working with Adobe and the AI that's in Adobe and all that kind of stuff came back with one promo because he had watched 3 hours of television. And the producer editor working with the social department AI platform didn't have to watch the shows.
Right. No.
The AI watched it down for them. So that saved 3 hours worth of time.
Right.
Who's going to be more productive? Which producer is going to wind up being more productive at the end of the day? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you're right. It is, we are in a moment where I don't think AI is going to replace filmmakers, but should AI be a tool by which filmmakers make better or more art? Yeah, absolutely. It's up to the artist. What brush are you going to use to?
Yeah. So yeah, there are many platforms. I use Opus Clips and I clip my podcasts and other videos, and it's like, it is freaking amazing. I mean, I was a pioneer in vertical video and it's like, and it's just at this point, it's like, yeah, it's so automated and so cool and so easy. Just removed all the barriers because I knew how hard that work was, right? Because I used to do it by hand.
Yeah.
And it's like, and now it just does it. And it's like, that means I can just put the stuff out there. Now we need to caution ourselves with how much we put out there because,
Sure.
we're flooding these channels with
Right. It's overload. Yeah.
content that we maybe aren't necessarily curating and reviewing as much as we should. So I'm certainly cognizant of that more so now and kind of got over the love of it. Right. And now it's like, okay, now, I have multiple channels. So let's start programming the channels with different content. So they're different experiences. And speaking of channels, you have a new podcast, which I watched with you and Marion. How's that going?
It's gone pretty well, thank you. Yeah, I resisted starting a podcast for quite some time for a couple of different reasons. The first is I didn't want it to be just duplicative of what I write. Secondarily, I didn't want to just be another voice into the void, out there pontificating my own ideas, single guy into a mic. And so I just was on a hunt for a format that was differentiated, but also a point of view that felt new and fresh. And I was talking to Marianne Rachette at MIPCOM, and I thought both sides of the Atlantic talking about the media universe from those individual points of view. Her very particular angle on the industry, married or actually kind of intersecting because we don't always agree with mine, just felt fresh. It felt different. Honestly, having a female perspective, counterbalance, my own, all of that just felt like something new to me and something exciting for me to do. And it was a collaboration, not a solo practice. So this was all kind of new to me and it's been just totally enjoyable. I mean, it's funny. We get together to do the podcast once a week and, by the time the hour passes, we're like, oh, that's it. So we're having a really good time doing it. I think we're also, at least based on the feedback so far, adding value. We feel people feel like, even people who follow us both individually or either one of us individually feel like they're getting something different when they listen to the podcast, a new perspective, because it's a conversation from two different points of view. And, we just recorded our second guest, and we're going to do guests here and there, but primarily we want to provide a conversation between two voices that you trust about topics that you care about in a pursuit of making yourself smarter on those topics on a weekly basis. And I feel like, without seeming self-congratulatory or hoping to not sound self-congratulatory, I think we're meeting that moment.
Yeah, I know. I've watched them, and you have a great chemistry, and obviously the knowledge base is there pull from. So I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's, at the end of the day, I think the chemistry actually makes the podcast work.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're both so super smart. It's like, okay, that's great, but what are you talking about and how do you talk about it? How is it engaging? Right. And that comes from, your personalities and this duo dynamic. Right.
Yeah, I have found I've been teaching for 20 years now, and I also give these presentations all over the world, like you talked about, and I have found that education is more effective when it's entertaining,
When it's a conversation.
right? And I think people like sleep on that, like, oh, I'll read this text or I'll watch this how-to video, and I think the ones that work better, the things we remember most, are the times that we're both informed and entertained simultaneously.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, Kent Reese, calls it edutainment. And, I think that's a really interesting, take. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do.
Yeah. But I also really appreciate the fact that, I listened to your speech, streaming media, and I was encouraged that people actually still do read, and that reading as a form of social media, as a form of engagement, is still there. It's still ranking. And you're a
Yeah.
prolific writer. I write a weekly blog, but that was encouraging, and it helps me because, you wonder, is anybody reading this stuff? And
Yeah.
ironically they do, because I get calls from people, and it's like yeah, no, I read your thing. It's like, oh, you did? It's like, okay, well, someone's reading it. Thank God.
Yeah.
Impressions and reading are a little different, but when someone says,
That's what I really like about this moment in time, you know, as disappointed as I can be about the mainstream media and journalism in particular at this moment in time. And there are exceptions, obviously. The Atlantic, I think, continues to do really amazing work, and other outlets like that. The rise of the creator writer, Substack, Beehive, these other creator platforms. Medium, I think, was fine for its day, but I think it's really been surpassed, by those two platforms and some others, just as a useful tool. But I think it's never been a better moment. Look at Ben Smith and the Ankler, and a couple of these other outlets. The rise of independent media, to me, in text. I don't think there's been a better moment to read. Like, you want to read something about any topic you want on the face of the earth.
yeah,
There's a newsletter for it. I
yep,
guarantee you. And so go find it. And it's a well-researched, well-written newsletter
yes,
from a
yes.
singular point of view, that you can either pay for, sometimes you can get for free. So I do think the rise of the independent news outlet, or the independent, writer, is, I'm very encouraged by that.
Yeah. It's hard to watch the news these days, but I find comfort in writers like Steve Schmidt and Heather
Yeah.
Cox Richardson. It's like, I think just between those two newsletters and now the Contrarian, it's like, you know what? That's all I need to know today. That's all I need to read, and let the visuals in my mind go. But I just don't need to be bombarded with the visuals. That I think that's why, we're in the situation we're in, is that the sensationalization and the use of video pictures and all that help make this guy so popular. And it's like,
Yeah. I mean,
okay, folks, cut that out and just try to read the news.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not an accident that a game show host is now, the leader of the free world, so to speak, or what's left of freedom anyway. And, this is, it's everything we always were worried about. But, when you look through history, those who know how to manipulate popular media best wind up abusing it worst.
Yeah.
And that's, you can go back to Hitler and
Oh, yeah.
Mussolini, but forward now to our current.
Well, the Gutenberg Bible and the Gutenberg press, because all of a sudden it was democratizing information to the
Yeah.
masses, and wasn't necessarily just the Bible being printed, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
Right.
right. I mean, and so I guess if I have hope, and there are many days I don't,
Mm.
but on the days that I do, it's that there is so much independent thought circulating out there. that reaches so many people that I do feel that there's an opportunity for the, the counter insurgency to take hold. I do think it will mean today's modern politicians who mean well, the Pritzkers, the AOCs, the Hochells on certain days, you know, to embrace those arenas. And I don't know that they really know how. I mean, AOC's obviously terrific at social media. Does she know how to take social media and turn it into an actual movement? That has yet to be proven out. And
Yeah, I mean AOC does a good job, but I think the embrace of podcasts, embrace of YouTube. You've written a lot about this, and kind of alternative media away from mainstream media, which is really having some issues. They're going through some things, right?
hard.
That I think we're in this big transformation, which is an opportunity for the rising of new voices, and
I
certainly
hope. I really do. I really do.
I believe in that. I think that's what's going to happen. But it's also right wing and left wing voices,
Yeah, but
right?
absolutely. But it's funny how the media is going through some things, but it's almost entirely self-inflicted. The commercial it first came the capital, the capitalist commercialization
Yeah,
of mainstream media. When I was growing up, when we were growing up, the news division and the entertainment division, there was a hard wall. There was a thick red line between those two.
they didn't have to make a profit.
And now that's the only reason the news division exists. And, that was the first step to where we were. And then, then there's the eradication of the fairness doctrine in 1987, and then Section 230 in the 90s, and then the lack of regulation around social media. Like, these things were all part of the same conversation. And so when mainstream, when CBS complains that they're being attacked by the current administration, it's like, dude, what did you think was going to happen when you started down? You knew he was a snake when you let him in.
Yeah,
And, it started long before Trump came to power. So, you're part of the problem.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And here we are as individuals trying to manage every day and trying to progress either with our businesses and live in maybe a tech bubble. I'm not sure. There's multiple bubbles. Some are bursting at the moment, but they're challenging times. I appreciate your voice and all the craziness. Huge fan. And, I think the disruption not only happening in mainstream media, but also streaming media and broadcast television. It's like, yeah, none of that destruction was wrought by AI. It's like, what? It's like, no, it's like
Bad management.
yeah, well, I think Amazon and Netflix are going to win the streaming wars because they built the infrastructure. But, when these streamers like, HBO Max and those people thought that they could compete from a technology level with technology companies globally, that was a fool's errand.
It was. And what's fascinating is, the traditional media players had an opportunity to embrace big tech differently as opposed to compete directly with them. And there are tons of forks in the road that I can point to. And by the way, Amazon, on one hand, I think you're right. They are coming for all the money. But on the other hand, if you look at the announcements they've made recently, let's put James Bond aside for a second. They basically said, well, I don't think we're going to be making entertainment programming so much anymore. We're going to really focus on sports, and we're going to focus on selling other people's channels. Those are the two announcements Jassy made.
Yeah.
And I think that means like they haven't really proven to be that great at making entertainment. There are exceptions out there. There's the Jack Reachers and the boys, but
Mhm.
like for the most part, they've overspent and underperformed. And
Yeah.
the viewership really does demonstrate that. If you look at viewer per dollar spent on their content, it's kind of embarrassing how bad they've done. And I think Jassy has done the math and is saying like, hey, we're just going to be Comcast now. We're going to
Yeah.
help people distribute. We'll do sport, but that's really just an advertising play. The rest of it is going to be like, hey, we'll sell HBO, we'll sell Disney Plus, we'll sell Apple TV Plus.
And that's where those platforms should be, is on Netflix and Prime.
Yeah, I don't know why everybody felt like they needed to go direct to consumer. I think the whole rush to go direct to consumer and commercial free in 2019, just like watching a friend run full speed into a brick wall over and over.
Or burning house.
And I it was like, why do you think this is a good idea? And now they're proving that it just wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, it's really sad because it's led to the death of some studios, the consolidation of studios, which means less movies.
Yeah.
Less jobs
now,
for
fewer
entertainment.
movies now,
Yeah.
fewer television shows now.
Yeah.
It's a big pendulum swing. I do think we'll swing back at some point, but I also think, and this is something I try to encourage everybody who will listen, embrace the creator economy. That's where a lot, the shows Portlandia, everything I've ever made from a producerial standpoint would probably not get greenlit today. And some really important.
We would find a home on YouTube for sure.
Correct.
Yes.
And there are independent methodologies to creating art that, you look at the Mr. Beasts and everybody uses him as an example, but look at Trixie Mattel. Trixie Mattel is an industry unto themselves, and they make a lot of money making content on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
That is a sole practitioner drag queen who is
Thank goodness, drag
an
queen.
industry unto themselves.
Yeah.
Using social media, but they also sell TV shows to mainstream platforms too. So, frankly, God love them, the Kardashians. Like, they have an industry unto themselves for a good reason. Kylie Jenner is a billionaire for a reason. It's not because she got a lot of money from E! To make, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It's because she used the creator economy to create an industry around herself. By the way, Paris Hilton, same thing. So there is a moment here for those artists who want to try to, free themselves from the shackles of the Hollywood industrial complex, which is, circling the drain for the most part. But you have to learn the new science.
Yeah. Yes. Reinvention, reclassification, reimagination, where it could all go. And really, it's creative people who should be leading that with the use of AI. So we're getting close to the end of the show. Any last plugs you want to make for events or your podcast, or how?
When will this go live?
Oh, next week.
Okay. So I'm at MIP London next week. I'm interviewing Pedro Pina from YouTube. I'm interviewing Ross Appleton from Tubi UK. I'm interviewing Justin Sampson, CEO from Bar. So stop by there if you're in London. But virtually, same week, I'll be interviewing Catherine Sullivan from National Cinemedia. I'll be interviewing Bruno Greiner from W. I'll be interviewing Matt Hennick from Trade Desk, who's launching their new CTV OS, all on Streaming Media Connect. Virtually, it's free. You can check it out. Just, Google as Streaming Media Connect and my name, and you'll find it. And then this summer, I'll be having my own stage at Stream TV in Denver.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks, Evan, for joining us. And we definitely want to have you back on the show. But thanks to all of you for tuning in, and catch more of our RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms. Please follow and smash that subscribe button. That's important. You can also follow us on TikTok and LinkedIn, and now Blue Sky. That's a real thing now. So thanks again, Evan. Thanks so much.
You.
It was a great conversation, and best of luck to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
RealmIQ. Transform your business with AI-driven innovation.
Subscribe to our Media Slam newsletter and learn more about the intersection of design, content, and technology.
CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing, and product development.